Welcome back to Art Practice ASMR. In this video, I'm going to be recommending anime and manga that you should watch or read in autumn. These are all stories to put you into the spirit of the season. So sit back, relax, and let's talk about some anime. The first anime on this list is not scary, and it isn't horror inspired, but it is very spiritual. And traditionally, autumn is a very spiritual time. So for that reason, I'm recommending an anime called Mushishi. Mushishi is an anime about a man named Ginkgo who travels the Japanese countryside searching for spiritual occurrences surrounding these creatures called mushi. It is a very slow anthology kind of series, not necessarily dealing with any sort of overarching story. It's more about these individual occurrences and the people involved, and not particularly about the main character per se. Mushishi is a very slow anime, and for that reason, when I first watched it, I didn't really like it. However, that was a few years ago, and I think I've come to understand what I want from anime, and I am considering going back and watching this anime from start to finish. The reason it's such a perfect anime to be watching in autumn is because it actually takes place at different points of a year. It has different parts of the story in different seasons. And that's a really big thing from this show, is that it's very ambient and it's all about the things going on in the world. That didn't really make sense when I heard it out loud, so to compare it to something, it's a lot like those scenes in the original Ghost in the Shell movie when Kusanagi is walking around Japan, and it's very ambient. It showcases different parts of the city that she's walking around, and then it showcases very mundane things like puddles and rain. That is a lot like Mushishi. It's kind of all about the world that Ginkgo is traveling through. Ginkgo is the main character. It's just all about these small mundane things, just capturing natural life. It also takes place in ancient Japan. If I understood Japanese periods, I would name it, but I don't understand those. Being set in ancient Japan, this show has way more of a countryside setting than a more industrial, modern Japan than most people are accustomed to in their anime. Interestingly enough, Mushishi was originally supposed to take place during modern day, but at some point the original author decided that it should be more of an older setting. But during that change, they never actually changed the outfit for the main character. So while other characters are wearing very period-appropriate costumes, the main character Ginkgo actually wears, like a t-shirt and sweatpants or something. I don't actually think they're sweatpants, but he wears considerably more modern clothing than all of the characters in this show. And I thought that was interesting. Another very interesting fact that I found, I was actually doing research so I could at least sound knowledgeable while talking, but another interesting fact is that Mushishi actually has a live-action movie made in Japan. I don't know if it's supposed to be good or not, but what I found interesting was that the director of the movie was Katsuhiro Otomo, who is known for being the author and director of Akira. And I thought that was very interesting that he went on to eventually direct a live-action Mushishi movie, and he's not particularly known for that, in the West at least. That was just something that I found personally fascinating. I think I'll quickly talk about what I'm drawing here for a bit. I wanted to draw something that kind of encapsulated what you'll be seeing in Mushishi, and so I decided to just do an autumn landscape. I don't know if it looks as good as I wanted it to, but I don't think it's the worst thing I've done. Anyway, moving on to another story. Here I'm going to be recommending a horror-inspired manga called Tokyo Ghoul. If it sounds familiar, that's because it actually had an anime adaptation that got really popular a few years ago. But I'm not going to be recommending the anime for various reasons. I haven't seen it, but from what I've heard, the first season is a very decent adaptation of the manga, but the second season is an anime original storyline, which is a pretty weird sudden shift, and a lot of people didn't like it. But to make things worse, the concluding season adapts to the second manga, Tokyo Ghoul Route A, and that's a pretty weird and sudden shift in the story that's being told. It goes from adaptation to original story, suddenly to adaptation again, without really connecting to what was previously told. So, yeah, just avoid that train wreck altogether and read Tokyo Ghoul like I am. For those who don't know, Tokyo Ghoul is all about a college student named Kaneki who gets into an accident with a creature called a ghoul. Ghouls are kind of like vampires, except they can go out in the day, and they feed on flesh, not just blood. The thing about ghouls is that they cannot transfer, the ghoul blood to other people like vampires can. So the way ghouls are made is that two ghouls make a child. Except for the main character. He gets caught in a freak accident where he's being attacked by a ghoul. The ghoul suddenly dies, and while the main character is sent to the hospital, the doctors unknowingly take organs from what they thought was a normal human, and they transplant them into the main character. However, they transplanted ghoul organs into the main character, and this causes his body to have a crazy change into being a half-human, half-ghoul hybrid. There are a lot of horror elements that are put into the show, but what I actually appreciate Tokyo Ghoul for is its human and civil rights commentary. You wouldn't really expect that kind of thing in a action thriller, fight manga. But this story actually has a lot in common with comics like X-Men. Even though people read it for the action, it has a lot of very deep political themes about, loving people who are different and not treating people poorly because of the conditions of their birth. And I just thought that was very interesting. It's not something that I really expected at first, but it's something that I've come to very much appreciate. The story is very well drawn. It's drawn by the author, actually, Yamashita, I think their name is. And it actually has a lot in common with another author who will be on this list, Junji Ito, they kind of have the same sensibilities for the layout of their scares. Even though this manga isn't scary, it does have a lot of horror elements, and they're kind of conducted in the same way the scares in Uzumaki were conducted for Junji Ito. They're kind of just like a strong build-up on one page, then you flip the page, and then there's like a full page payoff. And it's very interesting and well done, beautifully drawn. The illustrator actually has a really cool handle on how the fight scenes are portrayed, and I really like it. As for this drawing that I'm making, I don't particularly like it. I think I was just trying to rush through, but I actually had planned to, do something better than what this actually turned out to be. When I improve, I think I'm making much better fan art of this. But for now, you're stuck with this weird drawing of the main character. Yeah. Anyway, it's time to move on to the next anime. This anime is the first genuine horror anime that I'm putting on this list. It's called Yamashita, Japanese horror stories. And it is a show that I absolutely love the first few seasons of. This anime has like 12 episodes in a season, and each episode is 4 minutes long. They provide very quick, scary stories, some of which are genuinely scary. The thing about this show is that it has way too many seasons, and I think at some point there was a shift in writers or studios or something, and it kind of dips for a little bit, and that was the point that I stopped watching. However, I really want to jump back in. This show is another anthology kind of series, but this is more like Twilight Zone or something. There is no real overarching theme for the stories. They're all just quick horror stories to provide quick scares. Although I think in season 3 they tried to have some sort of connection between them with a boy drawing monsters and horror masks, but I don't really remember what that was all about. The thing that makes Yamashita a very effective horror anime is that it doesn't really try to have anime aesthetics. It doesn't use, the typical moe approach or anything. It doesn't even feature traditional animation. It actually opts for a more puppet show style format. All of the environments and characters are drawn on paper, kind of like South Park, but there's a lot of very limited animation. It kind of puts you in a weird sense, seeing all of this hand-drawn paper cutouts. And I feel that it was very effective for providing scares. I will say that a lot of the shorts in Yamashita can be hit or miss. I do think that they all try to be genuinely scary, or mostly try to be genuinely scary. I think there are a few that are fake outs or just funny, but there are some that I felt failed to be scary. Not necessarily because they were bad, but because Asian senses of storytelling kind of differ from Western, and sometimes what I find scary will be much different than what someone from Japan finds scary. So, there are some where the scares just didn't hit because either I didn't understand the culture behind it, or because culturally it's not something that I'm programmed to be afraid of. I don't really have any examples exactly to share, but I think it's kind of like the difference between the number 13 and the number 4. If you live in the West, you probably understand that 13 is the bad luck number. But in Asian countries, 4 is the bad luck number. So, it's kind of like that. There's a lot of different context at certain points for what you should be afraid of. However, for the most part, I will say that even if it isn't something that you understand why you're being afraid, there are a lot of moments that do effectively unnerve you, apart from all the other moments that are just genuinely horrifying. I'm trying to think if there's something I'm leaving out about this anime. I really like the paper puppet kind of aesthetic, but it might not be for you, so give it a try and see if you like it. Chances are you might. For the next and final entry on this list, I'm going to be recommending one of the true kings of Japanese horror, and I only wish that my art was good enough to even reflect a fraction of his creepiness and skill. I'm recommending Uzumaki by Junji Ito. If you aren't familiar with Junji Ito, I guarantee you've seen his work somewhere. He wrote the Amigara Fault story, where a mountain opens up during an earthquake, and it's filled with human-shaped holes on the inside. Uzumaki is one of his most famous and popular stories. It's a complete collection of stories about a town plagued by a spiral curse. Different people in this town become obsessed with the spiral shape, and different horrific things happen to all of the people involved, and eventually this spiral curse encompasses the entire town and leads them all to their horrible fate. The thing that makes Junji Ito's work so creepy is partially in the way that he makes all of the characters very beautiful and aesthetically pleasing, which very much counteracts the horrible, terrifying, scary art that he draws as well. He's also really good at building up tension. He'll have a bunch of different panels leading up to something, then you turn the page, and there's the payoff. A full page, horrifying creature, or whatever it is he's drawn. Uzumaki is actually one of my favorite mangas I've read. It was pretty creepy when I read it. It was something that actually stuck with me for days after I finished the story. And I'm cautiously excited because there is actually an Uzumaki anime adaptation coming out. It's being produced by Adult Swim in America, but the studio is Japanese and everybody working on it is Japanese. So it's a lot like what they did with Fooly Cooly, I guess. The director who's working on it worked on the Flowers of Evil, or Aku no Hana. And while you might be skeptical about all of that, because a lot of people didn't like that show, Junji Ito was actually pretty pleased that this guy was picked to work on Uzumaki. But don't worry, I don't think Uzumaki will have a bunch of creepy rotoscoped people. I think it's just going to be flat 2D and trying to replicate the style of the manga, actually. Because at least the teaser they released was all full black and white. Alright. So I think I've appropriately supported all of my recommendations, so I just kind of need to talk about how horrible this drawing is. Yeah. I really wanted to redo this, but unfortunately, my camera broke, and I am kind of just struggling with all of those problems right now. I just want to finish this off by saying thanks for watching, and next week is Inktober, so expect a bunch of videos that were much better than last year's videos. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.